I don't want to hurt you, bro. I do not want to shoot you. Put it down. You don't want to end it this way. You don't want to end it this way, brother. I promise you. Whatever happened today, it can be fixed. Don't pull the trigger. Put it down. Adeem, put it down, buddy. Don't do it, man. Put it down. Hands up, Adeem. Keep your hands up. Don't go back toward that thing, man. Walk toward me with your hands up. I'm going to walk you through every process. Please don't pick that back up. Please don't. Hey, one person talking. Please don't pick that back up. I got you. I got you, dog. I'm telling you, I got you. Listen to how this will go. If you'll walk out to me with your hands up in the air. When you get to about right here, I'm going to have you lay down on the ground. My gun is going in the holster. Bet that. It's going in the holster, but he's got cover. All right. Hey, I was all the way down. Have we exfilled from that house?
Voice you just heard is not a movie scene. It is not a scripted drama. It is the desperate cry of police officers standing face to face with a child just 14 years old, holding a gun in his hands after he had already done the unthinkable, and what came next would shake an entire community to its core. A son turning his mother's home into a crime scene, a family argument exploding into bloodshed, a quiet suburban night shattered by screams and gunfire, neighbors calling 911 in terror, a mother who would never see her dreams come true, and a boy who would never be the same again. How does a child go from being described as quiet and ordinary to pointing a weapon at his own mother and pulling the trigger?
One of the first ones we received was from a neighbor who said that there was a male who fled his house and he'd been shot several times. At the same time, we received a 911 call that there was a young black male who was running through the subdivision waving a firearm.
How does an argument inside a home spiral into a standoff broadcast on body cameras for the world to see? And how do officers plead with a boy who has just destroyed his family to drop the gun when every second could mean life or death? This is not just another tragic story. It is a haunting reminder of the darkness that can hide in plain sight, of how fragile family bonds can be, and how one decision in a single moment can erase futures, silence, dreams, and lives forever. Welcome to the Untold Crime Chronicles. Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and tell us where you are watching from. Together we can push this story to greater awareness. Now let's go back to the story. Tiffany Harris was born in 1984, and from the very beginning, people who knew her said she carried a light that could not be dimmed. She was the kind of woman who made her presence felt not by loudness or demand, but by the quiet strength of her spirit and the warmth of her smile. She grew up understanding hardship, but she also grew up understanding love, and it was love that defined nearly every choice she made. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. But most of all, she was a mother. And for Tiffany, motherhood was not just a responsibility, it was her identity. It was her mission. And it was the center of her entire world. Raising 3 children on her own was never easy. There were bills that seemed impossible to keep up with. There were nights when she went without so that her children wouldn't have to. There were moments when exhaustion sat heavy on her shoulders, yet those who knew her said she never allowed her children to feel the weight of those struggles. She carried it silently, and she carried it with pride. Tiffany was described as resilient, someone who never quit, no matter what came against her. She worked hard, sometimes in multiple roles, making sure that her family had stability, making sure that her kids never doubted that they were loved. She was not chasing luxury. She was chasing peace. She was chasing security. She was chasing a future where her children could go further than she ever had, and somehow, even in the grind of survival, she radiated joy. Friends said her smile could brighten even the darkest day, and her laugh could fill a room with hope. She was the type of woman who remembered birthdays, who called to check in, who listened when others were hurting. She made people feel seen. She made them feel cared for. But Tiffany's greatest joy came from her children. She celebrated every milestone, every achievement, and even the smallest victories. She was the mother who showed up at school plays, the one cheering loudest at games, the one who never let her children doubt that they were her reason for living. And in 2023, her joy multiplied when she learned she would soon become a grandmother. Her oldest daughter was expecting her first child, and Tiffany was overjoyed. She spoke about the baby constantly, imagining tiny clothes, cradles, and bedtime stories. She dreamed of holding her grandchild for the first time, of passing down family traditions, of watching her daughter step into motherhood. This new chapter filled her with a happiness she hadn't felt in years. It gave her hope. It gave her something to look forward to. But Tiffany's story was not just about joy. It was also about sacrifice. She carried the heavy weight of being both a provider and a caregiver, and she never let her children see how hard it really was. She would stay up late paying bills, go to bed hungry so they wouldn't, and rise every morning determined to try again. Yet even with all the strain, she still found room for laughter. She still found time for friends, and she still found the energy to remind her kids how much she loved them. She had a spirit that refused to break, and that spirit was what made her unforgettable to those who loved her. She was in a relationship with 31-year-old Cortavius Cruz. Not much was publicly shared about the depth of their relationship, but he was a part of her life and present in her home. And Tiffany was doing what so many single mothers do. She was trying to balance her role as a mother with her role as a woman still deserving of companionship and love. Those who knew her said she still held on to dreams of building a stable and complete home for her family. She wanted to see her children grow into adulthood. She wanted to welcome her grandchild into the world. She wanted to live to see the rewards of all the sacrifices she had made. And yet, behind the bright smile, behind the resilience, there was a truth Tiffany herself could never have imagined. The truth that the very child she carried in her arms, the son she raised with love and sacrifice, would one day turn against her. She had given everything she had to her children, but it would be her youngest, just 14 years old, who would be the one to take her life, and in doing so, erase all of her hopes and all of her dreams. In an instant, Tiffany Harris's story was not just about how she died. It was about how she lived, how she loved, and how much was stolen from her family the moment that trigger was pulled. Adam was just 14 years old, a boy whose name would soon be written in headlines. But before that night, he was simply another teenager trying to find his place in a world that often felt too heavy for him to carry. To his neighbors, he was quiet, polite, the kind of boy who would nod when spoken to but rarely offered much more. To his classmates, he was a shadow, present in the room but never quite fitting in. A kid who sat in the back of the class with his hood pulled up, headphones tucked under his sleeve, trying to escape into music and video games while the real world felt louder and harder with each passing day. To teachers, he seemed withdrawn, his grades slipping, his focus fading, and his potential buried under silence. But what no one could see was the storm gathering inside him. At home, Autumn lived with his mother, and their relationship had grown strained in ways outsiders never truly understood. She wanted the best for him, pushed him to focus on school, tried to set boundaries. But to a teenager already wrestling with anger, confusion, and a desperate need for independence, those boundaries felt like walls closing in. Every argument became sharper, every word heavier, and slowly the bond between them began to unravel. His mother saw a child slipping away, but Autumn saw only a parent who couldn't understand the chaos in his head. Friends later described him as someone who bottled everything up, a boy who rarely showed emotions until suddenly he exploded, and when he did, it was frightening. Short bursts of rage, slammed doors, fists against the wall, moments that would pass as quickly as they came, but they left his mother worried about what was growing inside her son. She tried to discipline him, tried to love him through the tension, but she also feared the day that anger might turn into something she could no longer control. Behind closed doors, Autumn began drifting further into isolation, spending long nights online, venting in messages, scrolling through forums where violence and frustration mixed with toxic encouragement, and like so many young boys searching for answers in all the wrong places, he found echoes of his own anger reflected back at him, feeding it, nurturing it, until it became part of his identity, a dangerous identity that even his closest relatives did not fully see until it was far too late. To the outside world, Adam was still just a child, someone you'd expect to see riding a bike down the street or walking home with a backpack slung over his shoulder. But to his mother, he had become a puzzle she could no longer solve. And in those final days, before tragedy struck, the arguments inside their home grew louder, sharper, and more dangerous, until all it took was one night, one argument, and one weapon in the wrong hands to turn a troubled boy into a killer, and a mother's love into a life cut short forever. It was a Friday evening like so many others, the sun dipping below the rooftops, the streets of the quiet neighborhood settling into silence, families closing their doors, children winding down for the night. But inside one home, tension was rising, words clashing in the air between a mother and her teenage son, sharp, heated, broken by pauses of anger and frustration. The kind of argument that had happened before, but this time it felt different, heavier, darker, a storm ready to break. Adam stood in his room, his heart pounding, his chest tight, every word from his mother cutting deeper than the last, her voice full of worry, of discipline, of love disguised as warning. But in his ears it sounded like rejection, like control, like a world closing in on him. And for a boy who already felt misunderstood, it was too much to bear, too much to swallow, too much to let go. In that moment, he made a decision that would unravel everything. He reached for the gun, a weapon that should never have been in his hands, cold metal now resting against trembling fingers, a boy holding a man's weapon, a boy holding death itself. And as he stepped into the hallway, his footsteps were slow, heavy, the sound of fate approaching. His mother turned, her eyes widening as she saw her son standing there. Not the child she raised, not the little boy she once tucked into bed, but a figure she barely recognized. His hands shaking, his eyes locked in rage and confusion. And before there was time to beg, before there was time to stop him, the deafening crack of a gunshot split the air, echoing through the walls, a sound that neighbors would later describe as thunder in the night, a sound that marked the end of her life and the beginning of his fall into darkness. Screams tore through the house, panic and chaos erupting in seconds, neighbors rushing to their windows, dialing 911 with shaking hands, voices breaking as they reported gunfire, a child with a weapon, a mother down. Please hurry, please hurry. The operator's calm voice promising help was on the way, but inside the house the damage was already done. Adam stood over the silence, his ears ringing, the gun heavy now, heavier than he ever imagined, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths, the realization slowly creeping in that there was no turning back, no undoing the shot, no rewinding the night, his hands stained not with blood, but with the weight of what he had done.
Hands up, Hadim. Keep your hands up. Don't go back toward that thing, man. Walk toward me with your hands up. I'm going to walk you through every process. Please don't pick that back up. Please don't. Hey, one person talking. Please don't pick that back up. I got you. I got you, dog. I'm telling you, I got you. Listen to how this will go. If you'll walk out to me with your hands up in the air. When you get to about right here, I'm going to have you lay down on the ground. My gun is going in the holster. Bet that. It's going in the holster.
And yet instead of dropping the weapon, instead of surrendering, he gripped it tighter, retreating into himself, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door. When police arrived, the flashing lights painted the street red and blue, officers stepping out with weapons drawn, voices sharp, commanding, "Get down, drop it, put the gun away." But Adam did not drop it. He stood frozen, the gun still in his hands. The boy and the weapon fused into one, and what followed was not just a standoff but a desperate negotiation. the body cameras capturing every word, every plea, every second of officers trying to reach a boy already lost in his own mind, a boy they called brother, buddy, son, trying to remind him of his humanity, trying to save him before another shot was fired, before another life was lost.
I do not want to shoot you. Put it down. You don't want to end it this way. You don't want to end it this way, brother. I promise you. Whatever happened today, it can be fixed. Don't pull the trigger. Put it down. Adeem, put it down, buddy. Don't do it, man. Put it down.
The night stretched long, tense, unbearable. Neighbors huddled behind curtains, whispers of disbelief spreading like fire. This can't be happening. Not here. Not him. Not them. But it was real. Painfully real. A mother's life gone. A child's life destroyed, and a community left to wonder how an ordinary evening had turned into a tragedy they would never forget. The night was alive with flashing lights, red and blue spilling across the quiet street, sirens fading into silence as officers took their positions, the weight of the situation pressing down on every second, guns drawn but voices trembling with urgency. Autumn, put it down. You don't want this. You don't want to end your life like this. And in that moment, they weren't speaking to a criminal. They were speaking to a child. A boy standing in the glow of headlights with a weapon far too heavy for his shaking hands, his face pale, his chest rising and falling with fear and defiance tangled together. The officers tried again, softer this time. "We can help you, buddy." Adam only shifted, gripping tighter, the weight of what he had done written across his face, a child trapped in a storm of his own making. Neighbors crouched behind curtains praying he would listen, their whispers filling the air. Please, God, let him put it down. Please don't let another shot ring out. Minutes dragged like hours, every breath measured, every small movement watched with fear, and then, as if the gravity of it all finally crushed him, Autumn's arms sagged, the gun slipping from his fingers, hitting the ground with a dull metallic thud that echoed louder than any gunshot, and in that sound the tension shattered. Officers surging forward, cuffing the boy whose face was wet with tears he couldn't hide, his body shaking as he whispered words too soft to hear. And the neighborhood exhaled, relief washing over grief, knowing the standoff was over, but the true weight of the tragedy was only beginning to unfold. When the gun hit the floor and Autumn was finally taken into custody, the silence that followed was almost unbearable. The flashing lights faded into the background hum of radios and footsteps, neighbors emerging slowly from their homes, faces pale, eyes wide, whispering to one another in disbelief. No one could understand how a quiet Friday evening had unraveled into tragedy, how a boy barely in his teens could pull a trigger and end his own mother's life. The shock ran like electricity through the entire block, leaving families clutching their children tighter, leaving parents asking themselves how such a thing could ever happen. Inside the house, investigators moved carefully, photographing each room, marking the hallway where his mother had collapsed, collecting the shell casing that had dropped to the floor. Every detail becoming a piece of the story, every smear of blood, every overturned object frozen as evidence, the home no longer a place of safety, but a crime scene, a place where love had turned to violence in a single instant, a place that would haunt all who stepped inside. At the police station, Autumn sat in an interrogation room, his hands cuffed, his head bowed, the weight of what he had done pressing down on him. Detectives tried to question him, tried to piece together the moments that led to the gunshot, but his answers came in fragments. Silence broken by bursts of denial, confusion, and then finally tears. He was not a hardened criminal with rehearsed lies. He was a child drowning in the consequences of his actions. A child who could not put into words why anger had turned into something irreversible.
The deputies immediately respond on scene. They come into contact with this young male and immediately begin to de-escalate the situation. When I tell you that these deputies de-escalated this situation over a 16-minute negotiation, their de-escalation was textbook, absolutely set the example on how de-escalation should exist.
According to Chronister, Adim put the gun to his head at least 6 different times during the 16-minute standoff, threatening to end his own life.
They were calm, they were collective, there was no yelling, and they established a rapport with this young male who at least 6 times continued to put the firearm to his head, threatening to commit suicide.
The investigation reached further, uncovering the weeks of tension inside the home, the arguments that had grown sharper, the emotional distance that had widened between mother and son. Witnesses confirmed what police already suspected, that this was not premeditated, not planned, but the result of anger boiling over, a weapon within reach, and a decision that could never be undone. And while officers built the case, the community built memorials, flowers and candles appearing on the front lawn, neighbors leaving notes of sorrow, children placing stuffed animals on the porch where they once played with Adim. The aftermath was more than just evidence and interviews. It was a community reeling, a family shattered, and a justice system now left to decide what should be done with a 14-year-old boy who had committed an unthinkable act.
Detectives say this happened during an argument between the victim and her boyfriend. I spoke to her family members off camera today, and they say this tragedy is heartbreaking, as not only have they lost that mother, but now her son is also facing time behind bars.
And as the investigation moved forward, the question weighed heavy in every conversation. Was Adim a monster, or was he a broken child who made a choice he could never take back? This case is more than just the story of one boy and one tragic night. It forces us to confront questions that are uncomfortable but necessary. Questions about anger in our children, about mental health left unspoken.
To make a plea for anyone out there that believes that they're a victim of domestic violence, for anyone out there that believes that they're facing a potential domestic violence, we have an absolute phenomenal resource here in the Tampa Bay area. The Spring of Tampa Bay will help you in every way imaginable. All you have to have is the courage to pick up the phone and say that violence will no longer occur to me or my family.
About the easy access to weapons that can turn a moment of rage into a lifetime of loss. It is a reminder that violence does not always come from strangers on dark streets. Sometimes it erupts inside our own homes, between the people we love the most, and when it does, it leaves scars that never fade. Adim's story shows us the importance of listening, of noticing the quiet struggles, the bottled emotions, the signs of a storm before it breaks, because behind every outburst, there is often pain. Behind every silence, there may be a cry for help. And when those cries are ignored, they can turn into tragedies. Like this one. Tragedies that leave mothers buried, children in handcuffs, and communities asking themselves what could have been done differently. This is not just about punishment. It is about prevention, about awareness, about creating spaces where young people can be heard before they reach for a gun, and where families can find support before arguments become fatal. If we learn nothing else from this story, let it be that silence is dangerous and intervention is everything. Thank you for watching this story on the Untold Crime Chronicles. Your support means more than you know. Please subscribe, share, and stay with us as we continue to uncover the stories that too often remain in the shadows. Your support is highly needed to keep bringing these truths to light. Because together, we can turn tragedy into awareness, and awareness into change.